So I felt morally obligated to go up there. When I went up, it was really a shambles. I don't know how many of you have worked in very large medical centers, but this particular one is regarded as, I believe, the largest private medical center in this country and elsewhere. And there are thousands of people. It was an enormous, complex maze. And I also found out that there was divided authority and responsibility, and you had to report to the president of the hospital as well as the chairman of the department, but there was also a vice president in charge of professional affairs that you really had to see first, but you couldn't see him unless you checked through with business manager, and there were 3 business managers because there were 3 institutions that were part of this, not only the university, but the Presbyterian Hospital and the New York State Psychiatric Institute, which was all part of this complex. I found all this rather heady. I had not thought of myself as being an administrator, and I realized I simply didn't know how to cope. That it was, no matter what you did, there were power struggles going on. Be quite happy to injure their colleague's reputation or career if they could get another office. And to get a secretary, oh, that was fantastic. You'd do anything for that, kill your grandmother, I guess. But it was the most competitive and power-driven setting that I have ever been in, although I've seen a few. And I tried to think, well, how am I going to deal with this? And thought, well, I just can try to deal with whatever I can deal with. But at the same time, I received a letter from the dean of the medical school who said, we've accepted a large amount of money from the National Institute of Neurological Diseases, and we have to have a research psychologist who is capable of evaluating infants and young children starting at the age of 8 months and give them psychological tests, and it's a very specialized area. But we have to get this person right away, and of course you have to hire this person because you're in charge, and otherwise we're going to lose our grant. So I went to a neighboring hospital where I talked to a colleague who was much better informed than I, and he said, well, if I find the right person, I will have him or her call you. About 10 days later, the phone rang in my office, and the woman at the other end said, my name is Helen X, and I was told to tell you that I am the person you are looking for. I thought that's a rather strange way of introducing oneself, but indeed our mutual friend Harold had told her to say precisely that, this is the person I'm referring to you, so just tell him, you're the person he's looking for. Obviously all these things have different meanings as one looks back on the whole convoluted series of events. Well, while I had done my graduate work rather early, Helen had not wanted to do any graduate work. She was an English major as an undergraduate, had not taken psychology courses, and it was not until she was in her early 40s that she suddenly decided she was going to be a psychologist. And Helen was a very determined person, so she indeed became a psychologist and received her doctorate the year before I hired her, which is another interesting story. When I interviewed Helen, I said, this very funny project, which is called, this collaborative study and so forth, really doesn't have an office. I'm not quite sure who's in charge of it. I'm not quite sure what your duties would be, and I can't even guarantee the salary. I think most people at that point would have walked away. I think I would have, and perhaps most of you would have. But I was trying to be honest since I didn't know what else to say. So obviously, since she had had a number of much better offers, she accepted this one. It wasn't until sometime later that I said to Helen, well, why did you really take this job? Why? And she said, oh, there was that kind of, I don't know what you call it, inner voice or something in the back of my mind that I don't pay much attention to, which said, oh, there he is. He's the man you're supposed to help. I should hasten to emphasize, as I think all of you know, is that Helen was a militant atheist. Mentioned God, she had a fit because she wanted to be a research psychologist, and there was a sense of security in dealing with data, you know, and you could make things into neat packages and so forth and somehow escape from all those ambiguities and terrible things that go on in the world. So she prided herself on being super objective. So that was the beginning of our relationship, which was a very close as well as a difficult relationship because temperamentally we're very different people. Yet there was a sense of a kind of joint goal. That is, we both wanted to help each other. I think that was unequivocally clear. And we wanted to help the department, and we wanted to sort of make something out of this shambles. So it was really after 6 years of working rather intensively on all these projects that I gave that speech, which keeps being quoted. I don't remember what I said, but it was something like that, you know, about there must be another way and so forth. And that seemed to, it was the most surprising moment, or one of the most surprising moments that I had encountered before that, because I expected Helen to be super critical and say, you know, what is all this? You know, come off it, you know. But that wasn't it at all. She said, of course, you're absolutely right. It was that feeling of almost instant joining that seemed to lead to these various events which Judy has described. One of the major ones, of course, is right here in Minnesota, which I think is interesting, isn't it? The Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which I thought was a very major turning point in all of this. So very quickly and sketchily, that is how I met Helen and how we started working together. Now, what time do we? And with reassurance, the next day we typed this thing up in extreme privacy. And this is how it began. I hope you won't mind. I think most of you know how the text begins. This is a course in miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. I caught my breath. And I realized as we started doing this, and we certainly seemed to me to be babes in the woods, where were all you people? Why weren't you up at Columbia Presbyterian to give us support and reinforcement? We didn't know anyone, or we didn't feel free to look up people. We didn't really know what was happening. And we had our extreme anxiety reactions. I certainly had mine. I realized very shortly, as we were just going through the initial 50 points on miracles, that if this were true, then absolutely everything I had ever thought might be true, or everything that I had been trained to believe was not. And I thought, am I up to this? Am I up to trying to make that kind of shift? You realize we had no idea if there were going to be 3 volumes or anything else. This is A Course in Miracles, could have been, a pamphlet. They didn't tell us. They didn't say, well, there's going to be this very long textbook, and then after that there's going to be 365 lessons in the workbook, and then later teacher's manual. Well, I'm quite sure we would not have fulfilled our function if we had had that script in mind. And it may be helpful at times to realize this, that by doing what I think is immediate and important for us to do, then we are led to the next step and the next step. And you all know that, but this is my personal experiences with that. I'll try to stop in just a moment, but one of the problems I had is that this is all a different language. And as I started to type this, I typed the material because Helen she could take it down in shorthand, and she could also type, but she couldn't bring them together. That was getting too close to it. So if she took it down in shorthand and read it to me, that was about as close as we could come to doing this, but she was afraid to even read it to me. I was always afraid it was going to goof, and she said, if it makes one grammatical mistake, I've had it. We were not necessarily grateful in the sense that I think we might have been, but certainly much more threatened by all this. And then I found that as I was typing from her dictation, fortunately, I have become a rather fast typist, and as Helen's boss, I thought it was only appropriate that I should do that secretarial. And she was listening to all this, and so I would type this thing up with original and 2 carbons, because I didn't want to lose anything. But then I found I was making very strange mistakes, like when salvation was mentioned, I found I reversed the letters and it came out slavation. And then my spelling isn't too bad, but when we came to crucifixion, I noticed I spelled it F-I-C-T-I-O-N. Or expressions such as you and your brother, somehow the R got lost in the first R, it was you and your bother. And so it's obviously done with, I would say, considerable conflict. Perhaps the thing that amazes me as much as it may amaze you, I don't know, is that we did it. And it never really occurred to us not to finish. We felt that this was something that had to be fitted in while I was co-editor of the Journal of Abnormal Psychology and turning down manuscripts all the time because they were unscientific. But perfectly aware that this was much more far out than the manuscripts we were receiving for publication in that eminent APA publication. And I thought, well, the only thing to do is to have a conscious awareness that this has to be a part of your life in some way, but it's not going to interfere with your job because you were hired to do other things. And if I'm supposed to give a lecture on psychodynamic theory or a seminar with students on whatever it was, I will do it that way, but I will try to change the way I look at it, and maybe in that way it will be different.